Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'll be doing a presentation on keeping it simple, small, less complex, independent, but at the same time trying to create value, create an interesting gameplay experience with multiplayer. Before we start, can I ask you, who here is an independent developer or in an independent studio? Raise your hand, please. All right. And who here came just because they want to do the next developer of Repo or Peak or something like that, like a friend slot game? All right. A couple. All right. 3. All right. Before we start, I'm Saulo. I'm the creative director and founder of Behold Studios. We started back in 2009 in Brazil. That's why the accent. I'm sorry, English is not my first language. But in 10 years after 2019, we moved the studio to Canada. So now we're Toronto-based. I started using Unity since before 2.0. So it's a long time ago, 17, 18 years ago, using Unity. I was actually present in the first Unite. It was like an event like this in San Francisco, but with like 300, 400 people. So it was fun back then. All right, I've been doing games for like 16 years as the head of studio at Behold. And I'll be, most of all, like talking a little bit of my experience of a head of studio and programmer and designer and creative lead in this small, tiny studio, and how we got to this present moment. And I think telling a little bit of my story can make you understand a little bit why the decisions and the strategies that we have today. And of course, I've been hearing as well from other studios and other independent developers that are creating games for the past 10 years, 5 years, and they're seeing like this shift, or they're trying to get to their second, third, fourth game. And because of that, they also are like changing their strategy and trying to develop better games. I want to talk about a little bit of like this framework or this strategy that I've been dealing with having. It's like Emergent game dev. I want to talk about some of the Unity tools that support us for multiplayer specifically, and also some of the challenges and solutions that I've been facing in my current project, and just sharing with you. And I hope we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So how did I get here? And I want to explain a little bit of this story so you guys understand my decisions now. So I'm one of the developers for Knights of Pen and Paper back in 2012. It was a very successful game back then, actually an IGF winner 2013, and it's a pixel art RPG for mobile first, then published by Paradox. And it was interesting back then when we were like developing games out of passion. I prototyped this game a little bit by myself the first couple weeks. So I was programming and doing design decisions at the same time, trying to kind of like understand what is game development at that time. I did have a little bit of experience back then, but not a lot. But it was, it was programming and designing and creating and trying to understand what's game development all together, all at the same time. So a lot of that was just pushing through, right? Not a lot of experience. I didn't know what I was doing or my team, so we were just like pushing through it. But it was a huge success. And with the first success, I think it's just a very common story that when you're going for a second game, now you think bigger, right? You have more resources, and you have bigger teams. And we're just like scaling and thinking that, this is now that we made this game with 3, 4 people, imagine if we have 8, right? So now we can have like this huge project. And we went through that experience. So we continue to push through with our talent, our like working nonstop and trying to be creative as much as possible. Then we created Chroma Squad, the second game. And it was also a lot of learning, We trying to understand how to communicate better in our team, and thinking that a bigger game, more things, more scale, more features would make a better game. So we kind of like bought this idea of like more is better. And we went for the third game, and having a publisher at that time, we grew that even more. Like, oh, now we have budget, we have funds, and now we can have a team of 15. So probably we're going to be productive 4 or 5 times more than we were in the beginning. And I think you probably know that's not the case, right? We, for some reason, kind of like understood that, a 15-hour game, that's the third one that we did, Galaxy of Pen and Paper, would sell more than a 10-hour game. Like we had this in our mind that we're like, oh, we need more and more. So we had dedicated talent, dedicated people for like specific tasks in the project, but not because we wanted more quality. For some reason, we wanted more quantity, you know? So our story was like huge. Like you could fit probably 2 huge books of like narrative of this RPG that we're creating. And then the publisher was also not forcing, but like talking us, incentivizing us to do more. Like, oh, like 10 classes for the RPG is not enough. Maybe let's do it 15, let's do it 20. Oh, like 10 levels not enough, let's do 100. So it's like more and more and more. And I think that led to a very complicated moment in the studio, but we pushed through it and we released it, and it was a successful game. And it's interesting because we're coming from this environment, this start of the studio, that we're doing this for passion. Everyone involved in the production wanted their opinions to matter. So we have a team now of like 15 people, and everyone has their own passion. Everyone has their own dreams. And we're trying to make a game together. And we had a very like horizontal, I would say, creative process in the studio. We did have some differences in like tasks, jobs, positions, responsibilities, of course, but for the creative process, we wanted for everyone to be involved and happy about it. So it was really hard to keep 15 people, very opinionated, very talented, but like everyone wanting to make their own game. So we kept on getting bigger and bigger. And we also tried to do some more complex things like 3D and multiplayer. That's our like first experience of doing like a full project in multiplayer and coming up to launch. It's with this game Outer Space back in 2019. And we also included early access, we included 3D. That was like our first professional experience with 3D. Before that was all pixel art, all 2D. 3D was like most, used for like our prototypes sometimes, or maybe a game jam, but like for a professional like project, or like the main project of the studio, this was the first time. So I think that led us to a crisis. And that was our most recent game called Cosplay Club. And that also was happening during COVID, was also during a moment that we were learning how to be remote for the first time. And so lacking abilities to communicate, organize that team that got bigger, and we wanted to kind of like everyone wanted to shine. And what I feel is that having a bigger team, like 12 to 15, considering that we had a bunch of successes before, when we got to this new project with funds, with time, and motivation, and dreaming what we want to do, everyone kind of like got very deep into their own tasks and complicated their own creations. What I mean by that is that, for example, the lead designer would come up with the amazing design, but so complex. The quest system, the narrative, all dynamic, all intertwined, a big system. But also the art would go into this challenge of I want to do the best, amazing VFX shaders and art style, and so complicated. And so everyone was getting deep. Also the programming team was now that we have time and funds, I'm going to do the most, complex, robust, modular, and incremental, system that we could do. So it's like everyone was making it more complex. But that didn't mean that once we're like putting this all together and making one single product that we would be able to do that. And it was just like a crisis because we went through this project of aiming for 2 years, but then it's 3 years, then it's 4 years, and it's just like, oh my God, when are we going to finish this project? Because everything's so complicated. And that kind of gets me to think about the initial moment of the studio. Wow, everything was so simple. It feels that we would even produce more, or more efficient with less people than now. Because now, when we have this crazy idea of a new NPC for the game, it takes us 2-3 months of concept, 3D art, animations, quest design, etc., to put that NPC in the game. So something that was supposed to be, creative and entertaining and interesting, and we're trying to find the fun in the game, actually became this very tiring process of meetings and discussions and endless meetings of 2, 3, 4 hours without any decision. It was just a mess, I would say. So yeah, and it's interesting at the same time because everyone is trying to give their best, right? Everyone wants to shine and put the best out there. But yeah, anyways, big crisis. Following the crisis also of the industry, 2022, 2023, was really hard for us to find publishers, and then we just had to, unfortunately, lay off some of our staff. Even the partners that was working for us, we are programmers and artists, we left the studio, we tried to find other jobs, and we kept the studio pretty much to finish the last projects and kind of dormant for a semester, 6 months. But the thing is, I wanted to get back with the studio. I wanted to start again a new project and playing games like Lethal Company, and playing games multiplayer and fun and chaotic, and at the same time seeing that a lot of low-effort games were coming out, and they even call friends slops, right? I don't mind the genre of friends slop, but I've heard that people with English as a first language, just slop is not a good thing. But so wanted to create something fun and iterative and playful. I started this project and trying to think how can I go back to that essence of keeping it small, but also programming and designing and iterating all together and just having fun in the process. So as a strategy was let's keep it simple. Let's keep it small. Not just because we don't have funds, because we didn't, but also because this could be a good thing for the studio. This way we could connect more with our creative process. And I really wanted the project to be very iterative, right? That we could have something playable right from the start, and then we can keep on improving and polishing and looking for the fun in the game. So yeah, so now the challenges are a little bit different, right? Because I would be studio managing, designing, programming, directing, wearing many hats. So I'm at some point I was editing a video for TikTok, and then I was fixing a bug, and then I was going through the payroll to see if everyone had their salary. It was too much, doing all the things. But I was feeling happier that way. It was an interesting moment. But so that's when I realized, I need to change the strategy. I think this is good. I'm getting back to my creative process and creating something interesting that people are liking it more than before. When we had 15 people, everyone trying to make complex ideas into the project, and no one liking the game. So, what is better, right? So I want to show you a little bit of the current project that I'm working on with a small team right now. This is a game called Deep Dish Dungeon. Still only wishlist on Steam, like we haven't even put it out a demo yet. It's a mix of a Metroidvania game with survival elements. So it's a big, huge, handcrafted dungeon, and you and your friends, up to 3 players, multiplayer online, of course, and you get to play and try to find all the puzzles and craft things. And the key here is that everything that you cook and eat is actually what's giving you the abilities and skills and things to traverse this dungeon. So, and this project is pretty much me as the programmer and designer and level designer and pretty much like everything else in the studio, and 1 full-time artist. So I'm like, woo, getting out of like a 15 people studio to like a 2 people studio. It was such a shift. But at the same time, it's so interesting to see that in 1 year of production, we got 15 hours of game, and it's pretty much complete. Like, we want to complete the game by the end of this year, so it's like a month. So yeah, and I kind of like wanted to give this talk to bring up some of the principles, like how can we have less people and less resources, but at the same time we're getting further, like we're creating more quality than before. That's how I feel. Of course, this strategy might not work for everyone, but it works for me, and I think we're in a good moment in the studio. So yeah, the idea is like, let's keep it simple, iterate fast, and try to pursue the fun and not necessarily the complexity, you know? One of the first ideas that came in the initial phases of the project is like, I want to create an emergent gameplay game, but how do I do that? And my way of understanding is I want also a emergent game development process. As in, if in the morning I have a crazy idea of adding a monster or a trap or something in the dungeon, by the end of that day, we have it in the game. Prototype and a first pass, and we can test and we can play and see if it makes sense for the game. And we've been doing that for like almost a year now. And it's so fun because we're kind of like iterating and finding this, I don't know, transforming this like little jokes that we have sometimes, this like moments of inspiration in something playable and something that becomes interesting in the game. So the whole idea is like, let's prototype everything that we think of, from idea to playable in 1 day. That means sometimes that we need to change scope or change the way we're doing things, of course. We're not going through like this huge concept phase and then, modeling phase and then texturing and animation. It's like, no, like everything's very simple. But so how can we do that? How can we be so fast? Because we're not using assets from an asset store. We're creating everything from scratch. So one of the ideas like, what if the first pass assets, they're actually final? Like, what if something that we create very like quickly, it's almost ugly looking, but like it works in the game? So I understood that if I make everything in the game effortless, bad, let's put some quote marks here, I don't need to make anything good. and it's interesting because if you make like some assets that are like so like realistic, and you put something that's not that realistic, it's kind of like an odd asset, right? It doesn't make sense. But if you're putting a lot of like pixel art, low poly, and things that are like a little bit ugly and sloppy, I would say, and you can even like put one into the other and just like push through it things, and they work. They work together. And I think there's a big charm on that. And that's my take. Like, oh, I could do everything a little bit sloppy, a little bit effortless. And with that, I can rapid prototype. I can have an idea in the morning, and by the end of that day, I can play that idea. So yeah, so we decided to have a low poly game, pixel art, that kind of like hides a lot of the mistakes, not mistakes, but like the details, right? And I think that was a good thing for us. I always wanted to do a PSX art style game, so that was also one of the decisions. And I wanted also, since I want to create a game that is a sandbox for the players to interact with this dungeon, not knowing exactly how to go through the dungeon, but experimenting things, I would also do that as a programmer, like as a designer. I would experiment some tools and things that I could give to the player and see if it makes sense for them. So adding a little bit of physics, or adding an object that I can throw, or like a grappling hook, or like, there's some tools that I've been adding to the game and testing if it makes sense in this sandbox. So I want the player to play, to have an emergent experience. So I'm also having an emergent experience during game development. But okay, so it's a multiplayer game. It's not that easy. Just one question here, like who has here programmed, create a multiplayer game like before? Have launched a multiplayer game, worked on a multiplayer game? Okay, a few. And as a programmer myself, I would say that's like times 10 the complexity of programming something, right? Like when you're like interacting with something, it's so simple in a single player game because you want to grab an object, you just grab that object, right? And you put some effects and you just create a code, an algorithm to kind of like get that object. So simple. But then when you're creating multiplayer games, like, oh my God, like I need to let the host know that I want that object, but what happens if another player is wanting that object at the same time, and you're just like, it's so much more complex. And then we always forgot something like, oh, I forgot to sync, the sound effects. Like, so the host is hearing everything, but the clients are not hearing anything. So there's a lot of complexity added. So I wanted, since the beginning of this project, like I want to use something that's done, that's there. So I went for Unity. Like that was my decision. Like not necessarily the best one. I don't know. We could use other solutions like Photon or like something like that. But what I understood at that time is like Unity was offering everything that I needed. So there's so many services available. Most of them are like no upfront costs, right? They're simple and very integrated to Unity, and the best feature for me is like implement and test on day one. Like I was prototyping, I want to test something on a multiplayer or a lobby system. It's just like really simple. You just put it there, and it's the first day you're already testing. Even like proximity chat, like that I wanted in the project. It was just one day of like implementing. So that was really good. So authentication, I'm using Unity, Cloud Save, remote config, analytics, of course, diagnostics, and a lot of things. But of course, Netcode for GameObject was also there and like available for me to use it right away, out of the box. So I think Netcode for GameObject was everything that I needed for a game like this. Peer-to-peer, so I'm not using dedicated servers in this project, and I think that I'll talk more about that, but I think that was a very important decision since we have not a lot of funds, small team, and we don't want to pay for like dedicated host servers for our players to play. Also, we had tools for lobby and matchmaking. This is also very helpful for players to find each other. And yeah, from day one, from prototype, the first iteration, we already had multiplayer implemented. I'm using also Vivox for voice proximity chat. Also, first day of implementation was already working. So very integrated with Unity. Run in a parallel kind of like universe of Unity. So like getting into the game, connecting players. I'm also putting those same players into a same channel so they could interact via voice. And using the proximity feature was also a very simple thing, as in just updating the player's position where they are, and I already had the proximity chat done. And that was like so good because I think it let me have more time to iterate, to play in my sandbox little game, other than being like losing hours and hours of like coding for multiplayer and technology that's hard to integrate, etc. And so I keep thinking about like how simple I was doing things, because since I want to have an idea and by the end of the day already have it implemented, I would say that everything's a little bit simple in my game. Some iterations, some UIs are all simple. But I came to realize that the sum of these simple things can actually be really good. It's very different from the approach that we had before, that everyone wanted a complex thing, right? Because if I'm asking the lead designer of my game to create a quest system, I know that they could complicate things and create an amazing quest system like never seen before. Of course, but like, do we have the funds? Do we have time? Are we going to be able to test all the possibilities of that system? And I think usually creators, they don't have much of like a producer mind, right? Like they don't see the limitations. That's why we kind of like piss off like a lot of producers, because they're like, oh my God, there's no funds, there's no time, there's no like, so yeah. And I've been realizing this, and I think I want to share this. Like, some of simple things can be a very complex result, right? Not necessarily everything needs to be complex. And one of the things that I've realized is that every decision that I did during this project helped me get here faster. And I'm not saying that you guys should simplify everything in your project, of course not. But this helped me in my project. So things to lower the complexity of a multiplayer game. For me, it's like, if possible, don't start later. Like, I've seen a lot of game developers that they finish a single-player version of their game, and then they say, ooh, now, since the multiplayer is more complex, we left it for the end, and now we want to add multiplayer to the game. I'm like, oof, that's really hard. Imagine going to all the code scripts in your project and changing everything back again, and then you're seeing new bugs happening, like, oh, this is so hard. So try to prototype in multiplayer as soon as you can. I decided to use peer-to-peer, and this helps a lot in costs and even like production and like time to test and everything. So if you want to reduce complexity, go for a peer-to-peer solution. Also, non-competitive games. This really helps when you're creating a multiplayer, because you can benefit a lot from trusting your clients. Since the players are playing with their friends, and they want to have fun, usually they don't go for cheating, right? Or changing their like clients, or if they are, they're doing it as a group of friends. So since it's a non-competitive game, they can just have their own experience. And this helps a lot in the project. Like, it reduces a lot of complexity to it. Also, if it's possible to store players' data locally, it's really good. Or just the host, maybe. Because if you're adding a server-based database, it means that there's a machine running like 24/7, like just storing players' data. And now you have to create an interface to access that server, right? And you're sometimes even using, you can use Unity services for that, but you can also do like a web-based solution or something like that, but it's just adding complexity. So in my case, I was like, no, I can just store locally every information that I need from the saved game. So this was really good. Also, if you don't have time for like, or even the experience for complex multiplayer prediction algorithms, and we know that that's really tricky. If you're doing like a shooter, and the accuracy and response rate and latency, those things are important. That really complicates your life. So consider maybe trying a more slow-paced game. And I think that was one of the things that really helped me in the process. Like, if I have a little bit of latency in the game that I'm creating, it doesn't matter a lot, you know? Of course, more than 500 milliseconds, that would be bad. But like for like around 120, 200 milliseconds, it's pretty nice. The game is slow paced. Even like if it was a turn-based game, you wouldn't feel that the latency is getting in your way, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you can do to get smart about the decisions. And I think that reminds me of the beginning of my career, because when we lacked experience and we lacked resources, we had to be smart about our decisions. And we stopped being smart when we had the resources available. That's kind of like an odd place to be, but I think that happened to a lot of other developers. And I've been talking to other studio heads, and they all feeling the same. When they're like in the second, third, fourth game, and now they have the resources available, the publisher available, and the experience available, they just stumble. Like they make it too complex for them. So I'm going to give some examples of little decisions that I did during the project also that helped me. Very specific cases. Like just, I picked up 4, so we could go through them. Like I wanted the game to play from anywhere. Like it's a huge dungeon. Huge, like a Metroidvania style game, but a 3D one. So it's all interconnected. There's corridors and doors pretty much everywhere in this dungeon. And I was like doing this game, in my background, I was doing a lot of procedural games. And it was so much harder to test. Like imagine that I need to test just one feature. I would need to start a new game, and there's like some debug options and things that I would say. So it took me maybe a minute or 2 minutes to kind of like test a little thing. And this project, since it's a handcrafted dungeon, I think that was really helpful because I can just hit play wherever I am, and I'll start a multiplayer session locally in exactly that spot where I'm looking at. So I can test anything in the dungeon right away, just hitting play. And I think that really helps. So how did I solve that? I kind of like created multiple spawn points, including one that's called test, that if the test is active, it's on debug mode, it just spawns the players in that position. And I can just, before hitting play, I just update the test object to the camera position, align to view, right? And then I'll just hit play, and then I have, like, of course, a console with lots of special debug options. I can spawn any item, and can spawn like enemies, and I can test right away. And I think one thing that was really good too is that when I hit play, the game automatically understands, oh, I'm in the main scene of the game, and not in the main menu, right? So I'll not be looking for a lobby or like trying to, connect with other players. I'm just like, I'm locally, I'm debugging, I'm in the editor. So let's make a local game and like start right away with 2, 3 players and just put everyone there. So, and I think it's interesting because this was a design decision. Like I wanted a handcrafted dungeon, and that led me to a very simplified way of playing, debugging. So it's interesting how like our decisions in the project kind of like affect everything, and even the play test time. Also another kind of like complex thing that I had to solve is like who saves and loads this game, because it's a huge dungeon, right? So I decided like, oh, maybe only the host saves. And I think it was a smart decision for this project. The host knows everything that is happening, but the clients, they don't. They only know the things that matters to them. So the host is more like, as they say, fat server, fat host. So they have all the information. So it was easier for me to just, okay, so let's serialize everything that the host knows. And I wanted to use Unity scenes as for the first serialization process. I'll talk about more in the next slide. Also, one thing that I try to do is like saved files can be shared. So if I'm the host, I'm playing with my friends, but I don't want to play anymore, or if they want to play, I can just share the file, and they can run the game and just continue to play it. And also, I wanted the Unity scene to be my first serialization step. Like I didn't want to create any other technology for serialization. So I decided that when I'm creating a new game, I just load the scene in Unity. So all the objects are there. And then I kind of like go through generating a JSON file on the like new game. It doesn't take a long time, but it's just like kind of like creating a new save file for that game. And if I'm loading a game for the second time, I actually go through the scene, destroy everything that's dynamic, like objects that the user can create and build. Everything that is not dynamic, more static to the environment, I keep. And then I update with the information that I have on the JSON file that was like saved from my previous games. One thing that I needed to implement was, I needed a unique identifier for all non-static objects in the scene. So I need a little bit of hassle because if I have something very specific, like a bonfire right there, there's a bonfire right in the middle of the scene, and that bonfire you can put wood to burn, and it needs to know like how many woods and sticks are there. And to save that, I need to know, is this a specific bonfire and not all other bonfires? So I needed like a unique identifier that I had to create. So also one other thing, player information. I wanted to save everything that the player has, like an inventory and items that they're carrying and buffs and debuffs and everything that the player has. So I also use for each player a unique player identifier. And pretty much the host kind of like stores that information. So when my friend is joining me again on the second time, I have all the information for them to continue play. So yeah, to wrap up, before we go to Q&A, the idea of this talk is like, don't complicate your life. I think some of simple things can make a very complex game. And if you choose this simple path, you have more time to polish and iterate and find the fun in the game. Unit services are there. There's other solutions too, but they're like all integrated, simple to use from day one. And also be smart. I think we can reuse a lot of this tech that we're creating. So yeah, be smart about it. And that's it for now. I would like to open for like Q&A. And if you want to follow me, social media and know about the projects and games that we have, you could just scan the QR code. Thank you.